Today's video is brought to you by Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout has helped over 100,000 people start their own podcast. It's the easiest way to host, promote, and track your podcast. Start your free 90-day trial today at buzzsprout.com. How can podcasters deal with the glitches and drop Zoom calls in the middle of a podcast interview recording? Let's explore that coming up next.
Podcasting, training and development.
Hey there, podcaster. My name is the Shanman, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and podcast producer, and now recently labeled the podcast therapist as of last week. Today's video, of course, is brought to you by my essential equipment guide to getting started with a podcast. So if you're just discovering this video for the very first time, I have a list of equipment that you can use to start your own podcast and get it to sound a little bit better. If you're just using a USB microphone, maybe you want to take it up another notch. Maybe you're looking to video podcast. You might want to get some updated equipment. That guide is going to have it all for you. That is all down in the description of this particular video. There's a link directly to where you can get that download. Go check it out. So in today's video, we are going to be answering a question that actually came off of YouTube comments today, as of this recording, which is, well, you're seeing this on Tuesday, so it was yesterday when this comment came through. And I'm going to just jump on over into the comment section right now. It's from Matt Jaques, and he asked a question on a particular video that I have done about Zoom, and it was the video that I did about Zoom called Higher Quality Podcast Recordings Using Zoom. Now, I know this is a thing that a lot of podcasters are trying to get. They're trying to get the best possible quality out of not only their microphone, but their guest's microphone as well. And I've got some answers for you that really are based inside of philosophy, my own personal working philosophy of what I believe a good podcast recording sounds like. You don't have to take my word for it, but you can certainly formulate your own as you watch this video and all my other videos as well. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on over into that comment. And he gave me thanks about the video. He said, Thanks for this, but just so I understand, this doesn't solve the problem of audio dropouts, glitches, and network latency that can still pop up over Zoom, right? There are some cloud recording services out there that seem to solve that problem by recording the guest audio directly to the cloud, and then you download it afterwards. Zoom has cloud recording too, but I'm so frustrated that it's pre-mixed down to one track. This is a very common thing for a lot of podcasters, especially if you are a content creator who is a podcaster and you feel frustrated that you're not getting the best possible audio from your guest. And so I've mentioned this in previous videos that talk about what kind of audio your guest should have. And you being the content creator, and this is just something that is my own working philosophy, it does not have to be yours, but is my own working philosophy, is that you have to make it easy for your guest to join in on your call. Whether you're recording it via Zoom, whether you're recording it directly through StreamYard, it's going to be kind of up to you. You have to make it easy for your guest to join into the call. Now, whether they have the equipment or not it can be something that can be prepped ahead of time, but not all of your guests are going to have a microphone. Not all of them are going to have a USB microphone. And this is where the frustration lies with a lot of podcasters. They say, oh, I can't get the best possible audio because, it sounds terrible. Well, you have to remember that sometimes these people who are coming onto your podcast, they just don't have the equipment, nor do they care about what your podcast is going to sound like, what's coming from their end. But the question really remains is like, how do we develop, or how do we get rid of the glitches and the call dropouts? All right. So before I jump into this, I want to make mention of a couple things in areas where you're seeing people in the media using these services that are like WebEx, Zoom, StreamYard, things like that. And you see a lot of dropouts. In fact, over the past week, I've seen over a dozen dropouts on certain network news shows where someone is interviewing a guest that is in a remote location and the feed drops out, or maybe the internet connection isn't as great. And that's just something that network news anchors have to deal with. That's just something that late night TV show hosts now are having to deal with, even though most of those shows that are late night are pre-recorded. So they have a little bit more flexibility on what they can edit in and what they can edit out. And I would say that you as a podcaster kind of fall in that same area of what a late night TV show host might be doing, is that you have a little more flexibility of what you can edit in and edit out. So it's going to be up to you and based on your philosophy of how you want that particular podcast to sound. If there's dropouts, yeah, you can go in and you possibly can edit out some of those dropouts, or you can just edit out sections to where it just sounds clean. But as far as the audio quality is concerned, that's really going to be on the microphone or on the other person's end and whether or not they have a quality microphone. Now, let's address this issue that was brought up about using some services out there that allow you to record locally on your end, and then someone else on the other end is allowed to record locally. There are services out there like Zencastr, and I believe it's Squadcast. Now, I haven't used either one of those. I think I used Zencastr once for a podcast recording, and at the time, I'm not sure if I was really thrilled with the service. I'm not going to say that it was good or a bad experience. It just wasn't something that stood up to my standards, but those services do exist. Now, with those services, it really makes it cool because you can certainly go in and you can record a podcast interview locally, and it's all the audio is saved locally, I believe, on your computer, and then the person on the other end, that audio is recorded locally, and then the audio is then, I think, transferred over, or someone sends you that audio back over to you, and then what you have to do as the content creator is that you have to sync up those two pieces of audio to make them sound like an audio podcast. So that is something that you can do. For me personally, though, that is one too many steps for me. I mean, you're talking about maybe 1 or 2 steps, but for me, it is just something that takes too much time. In order to get the piece of audio, you have to download it, then you have to put it on your computer, then you have to import it into your digital audio workstation, then you have to sync it up. There's a lot of steps that are involved with that. And that's what a lot of podcasters like to think that that's what podcasting is about. Just because I'm on radio doesn't mean that I'm doing it right, but I just know that what I have dealt with in the past when dealing with audio and multiple pieces of audio is that we're recording one file. It's going to be a straight mix down file that is going to be of the podcast host voice, and it's going to be of the guest host, and it's already mixed down into one file, and you can go ahead and edit from there. And that's how all my audio interviews have ever been in the last 20 years. That's all I've ever known, is just one simple audio file. Now, have I run into problems where I could have used the individual piece of audio? Yeah, an individual piece of audio from someone else? Yeah, I could have used that, but it wasn't a make or break deal for me, and that's what I think is really important. You have to decide what is going to be make or break for you. Now, I want to move over into this area of Zencastr and Squadcast and say that it's probably not something that I would use. I would prefer to actually record the Zoom calls directly through my mixing board and into my DAW, into basically Adobe Audition. I mean, you're already going to be spending $20 a month on the DAW itself if you're going through the Adobe Creative Cloud. So you might as well utilize whatever equipment that you have to record into the mixing board and into your DAW to make the process a lot more simple. Now, the only way that I would use Zencastr or Squadcast is that I would use it if I was creating a podcast where it was me and I had another co-host, a regular co-host, someone who was doing the podcast with me every single week. And we wanted to give, I guess, the theater of the mind, I guess you could call it almost like an illusion, but give it the theater of the mind to the listener that both of us are in the same room or in a studio talking together, but we're actually remote. He's in his house and I'm at my house, and we're able to get those two recordings and make it sound like we're in a studio. Now, that's the only other time that I probably would use a service like that, if I was trying to create that theater of the mind that we were both in the same studio. Other than that, I don't think it's, for me, something that would be worth my time. It might be something that is worth for you. I do know that if you're going to use those services, you're having to spend money using those services, and some of those services will basically give you certain plans and how much time you can use on their platform to record podcast interviews if you wanted to do that. So some will be 2 hours a month, some might be 12 hours a month. It might cost you $9 a month, or it might cost you $20 a month, and it all depends. Now, let's jump back to that Adobe Audition Creative Cloud subscription. You're paying $20 already for Adobe Audition, and then you're going to pay another $20 for something like Zencastr or Squadcast. Now, again, it doesn't mean that I don't want you to go use those if those are the easiest options for you, but I'm going to tell you right now, you probably can get a lot more bang for your buck if you just invested in equipment and learned how to use the equipment to patch in audio from your computer into your mixing board, into your DAW. That's going to be probably the simplest way that you can do this and really cut some steps in half. Now, when it comes to cutting those steps in half, it's very important that you learn those DAWs so that you can figure out how to make those steps much easier. In fact, at this point, as a podcaster, if you're watching this and you've been podcasting for quite some time, you should already have a template set up inside of your DAW to where you're just importing audio, and then you're able to cut the time in half by just importing audio, and then everything is already set up for you. But if you're someone who likes to really do that refining of the audio and you like to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, that is going to take a lot more time. So this really is all based in your own personal philosophy of what you see as effective editing or what you might see as over editing as well. It's going to be up to you. I leave that up to you to think about. I leave that up to you for your own personal philosophy. But if it were me, I would much prefer to have the audio almost ready to go to where I can just drop it into my DAW, and then I can start putting the pieces together inside my multi-track player, and then from there do a mix down of it, and I have a podcast. Most of my own personal podcast edits really last anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, unless I'm doing some real heavy work for a client. That might take me maybe an hour, hour and a half, because they're very particular about what they want to hear in that particular podcast episode. But for me, it takes me about 20 to 30 minutes just to edit a podcast episode. That is saving so much time. I think most podcasters who have taken surveys from me say it takes them anywhere between 5 to 6 hours a week just to edit a podcast, and it should not take that much time. So that's really kind of a look inside of my brain and how I think about using these services like Squadcast or Zencastr and Adobe Audition. I would prefer to have one single already mixed down file that is recorded directly through my mixing board into my DAW, and then I've recorded a podcast episode, and then it leaves me some leeway to edit inside in post-production and decide whether or not I can get rid of those glitches or I can get rid of those dropouts that we're dealing with. So again, it's all about your philosophy. One last thing that I should mention is that if you're going to decide to do any of these recordings via Zoom or anything like that, I would always recommend that if it's over Zoom, Skype, even phone call, I would recommend that someone is in a good cell area. I would recommend that someone is probably plugged into an Ethernet cable so that they're getting the best possible connection, so there's very few dropouts. But having dropouts is just a part of being a broadcaster and is a part of being a podcaster. This is just the nature of what you're dealing with when you're doing interviews. So you tell me, how do you deal with dropouts? How do you deal with glitches in your own podcast? Leave them in the comments section down below. Your comment might help out a podcaster, just like, I believe, what was his name? Matt. It might help out Matt, and hopefully someone can go through the comments and see what the solution is for you. And don't forget to leave a thumbs up on this video if you found this video helpful. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell notification, or the little bell button, so that you can get notified when I drop a brand new video. In the meantime, this is your podcast therapist saying thank you so much for watching, and I'll be talking to you next time.